Thank you. We have been, again, in chapter 4, and what we've been studying, discovering God's purpose. In chapter 4, what we've learned is discovering God's purpose requires us to understand the different contexts of our lives, at least 5 different contexts. Those contexts being the context of our creation, context of our clan, the context of our cross, the context of our calling, and then the context of our career. We've been exploring the context of our creation for the past few weeks. And in your books, on page 35, the author states that there are 2 important aspects of the context of our creation that we must understand. And those 2 aspects are that God chooses us for His purpose before we were born. And then the second aspect is He gives us the giftedness to fulfill our purpose after we are born in the context of our creation. Now, chapter 4 primarily deals with these 2 aspects. The aspect of our chosenness and then the aspect of our giftedness. I want to take a moment to commend and thank Brother Bailey again for taking the class on Sunday where y'all began to actually explore these concepts of giftedness. Let's give him a lovely applause for our class. And Brother Sands and Sister Sands, what we're doing is, well, just stay right there for right now. We're going to make a 3rd group here in a minute, okay? We have enough to make a 3rd group. We're combining our groups as a result of just different people being out of town, okay? So, tonight what we want to do, and what we've been trying to do is to really understand this first context. And this first context, again, has to do with the context of our creation. And what we've done in trying to help us to understand that, we have looked at the first chapter of Genesis, part of the first chapter of Genesis, and then the second part of Genesis. And we tried to illustrate through the concept that God uses in Genesis chapter 1, the notion of seed, and how that correlates with helping us to understand what God meant when He created us in the beginning. And so we began to talk about, we illustrated this through having a bag of seed on each group's table, and how that each seed contained the very creation that God had in mind in it. And likewise, we're going to be building on that idea as we go along. But tonight, I want to go a little further in helping us to understand this idea of our being chosen and then our giftedness. Our being chosen and our giftedness. So I'm going to call our attention now to the book. And we're going to read, and then we're going to do an exercise in our group. But I want to make sure that we understand these 2 concepts of chosenness and the idea of our giftedness. On page 36, I want to read the first paragraph there on page 36. The heading of this particular page is, "What is God's chosenness?" The author writes, "The Apostle Paul said, God chose us before the foundation of the world, and He predestined us according to the purpose of His will. We are chosen by God for a specific purpose in life before we were born." We were chosen by God for a specific purpose in our life before we were born. We tried to illustrate that even with the bag of seeds and then the actual manifestation of what the seed is. God chose us, and we got to keep that in mind. When we talk about the context of our creation, we have to begin understanding that our creation began before we normally think of our creation. That is in our physical form. We're spiritual beings. And then I want to call our attention also, so when we talk about God's chosenness, every time we hear the word chosen in the Bible, we must begin to view that from a lens of being spirit. That which God had in mind before time. That's when he chose us. Okay? Now, page 37. If you have your book, make reference to page 37 at the top of the book. What is God's giftedness? So, the two aspects that we must understand about the context of our creation is the concept of being chosen and the concept of our giftedness. Everybody say chosenness and giftedness. Now, when we talk about chosenness, we must begin thinking of our spirit being chosen. Okay? Now, we're going to contrast we're going to begin to talk about the other concept of giftedness. Page 37. Arthur writes at the top, what is God's giftedness? I want to begin reading where it says gifts on page 37. Gifts may be defined as potential God predestined, notice the word predestined, as potential God predestined in you during your creation. So when we talk about giftedness or gifting, we're talking about that potential which God predestined in you during your creation. During your creation. That means creation. When we talk about creation, our mind goes to, or when we talk about creation or chosenness, what should we be thinking?
God did in the spirit world from the very foundation.
We're talking about your spirit being. That which God did before you showed up in time. Okay? So whenever we talk about chosenness, or whenever we talk about creation, our minds should automatically go back to thinking of ourselves as a spirit. What God did in spirit. So, when we talk about even our gifts, gifts may be defined as potential God predestined in you during your creation. When God thought about you and spoke you into existence. When He said, let us make you in our own image. That's when He gifted you. Okay? So, the question then is, what is gifted? What is giftedness? Arthur goes on to say, your gifts may be mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and or a combination of all of these. So when we talk, as we begin to actually talk about and clarify your giftedness, we want you to begin to think in terms of things that you now possess mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, or a combination of all of these things. Everybody there? Now, on the same page, 37, at the last paragraph, Arthur writes, several biblical writers mention how God gave them giftedness in the context of their creation. Now, I want us to pay close attention to this because it'll tie into the exercise that we're about to do. Several biblical writers mention how God gave them giftedness in the context of their creation. The psalmist said, for you created my innermost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. In the Hebrew language, the expression knit me together in my mother's womb means God planned and shaped us with the giftedness to fulfill His purpose before we were born. Isaiah writes, everyone who is called by my name, God, whom I have created for my glory, I have formed him. Yes, I have made him. That is found in Isaiah chapter 43, verse number 7. I would make a note of that. If you notice, I meant to mention this to us in class. I may have mentioned this, but I'm going to make reference to it again. This book is loaded with scripture. But in order to get to the scripture, you got to take note of the footnotes. When you see a footnote in the back of the book, it'll identify what the scripture is. Okay? Now, let's look at page 38. Next page, I'm going to read just the first sentence of that page. God gives everything he creates giftedness to fulfill his purpose. When you think about it, God never creates anything in life without equipping it with the giftedness to fulfill its purpose. So, why did God give each one of us giftedness based on what we just read? What's the purpose of God giving us giftedness? To fulfill our purpose. To fulfill our purpose. It is impossible for us to fulfill our purpose without our giftedness. And so it is critically important for us then to understand what our giftedness is. Our giftedness is. For without our giftedness, we cannot fulfill our purpose. And what we want to do tonight is to begin to help each one of us identify what our giftedness is. For without it, we cannot do what? And that's what we're all interested in doing, is fulfilling our purpose. Everybody there? Okay. Now, at the bottom of the page 38, he mentioned this. God never requires anything from us that he has not already given them the giftedness to fulfill. He gives some illustrations. God never requires anything of you and me that he hasn't already given you and me the giftedness to actually fulfill. We got to really understand that. Everything God has required us to do in terms of fulfilling our purpose, I have already been given it by God. Everybody there? Now, lastly, on the next page, how to use your giftedness to find your purpose. Now, this is going to really be insightful. In order to find your purpose, part of helping you to find your purpose is identifying your giftedness. If you can begin to identify your giftedness, it will help give you clarity on what it is your purpose is. Okay? At the top of page 39, author writes, God's purpose for your life draws heavily upon your giftedness. So whatever his purpose for your life is, the demand that is placed on your giftedness gives you indication of what it is that your purpose is. Everybody there? Because whatever God made you to do, he gave you the giftedness to do it. So, any questions about that? Can everyone see how then that your giftedness and your purpose are uniquely connected with each other? So the question then is tonight that we want to make sure that everyone understands is to begin to get some sense of what it is your giftedness is. Okay? Now, how do we discover what our giftedness is? And that's what we're going to do in the exercise tonight. How is it that we are to discover what our giftedness is? Okay? Author writes this. One excellent way to discover your giftedness is to ask yourself, what achievements have I made in my life since childhood that I feel good about? That's one way. I'm going to say that again. One excellent way to discover your giftedness is to ask yourself this question. What achievements have I made in my life since childhood that I feel good about? Everybody take out a piece of paper, something to write on. Okay? Okay. Take out a piece of paper. Number on your paper, 1 to 5. 1 to 5. 1 to 5. I want to take a moment. I noticed we had a visitor come in among us while class was started. I want to take a moment to recognize our visitor. You mind? Your name, sir? Daryl? Court? Where are you from, Daryl? Oh, you worship at North Turtle Way. Good having you with us tonight. Okay. So, on your paper, write out number 1 to 5. And I'm going to play a song. We're going to do 2 exercises tonight. I'm going to begin a song. And as I play this song, I want each one of you to reflect on writing at least 5 achievements that come to mind. And don't overthink this, because if you overthink it, it's probably it's not natural. It wouldn't be able to be identified as something that's a giftedness. Notice the author talked about one of the things when God gifted all of his creation, whatever you are gifted in, it comes natural. It's a natural type of occurrence. So, go in your mind's eye. We're going to give you some time to do that. And think of some of the achievements. And hey, it doesn't have to be something you got rewarded in. Let me give you some other criteria to work with in this, okay? One excellent way to discover your giftedness is to ask yourself, what achievements have I made in my life since childhood that I feel good about? Then describe 1 or more of your achievements in detail. Just one of the 5. These achievements don't have to be major achievements. You may not have received an award for them. They simply have to be things you feel good about. Everybody, you with me? One way to help you in this process is to ask someone, don't worry about that process. What you also want to do is ask yourself, what is my story of achievements? Look for reoccurring patterns of things you like doing and things you tend to repeat, or things that keep emerging in your achievements. Ask yourself, what drives my giftedness? Anybody got any questions about that assignment? Okay? Sister Miller, go right here.
Does this go along with the songs you're about to listen to, or is that separate?
The song is just playing while you are thinking about your achievements.
Oh.
Okay. No, so this song is actually being played to just give you time to meditate on this process, and when the song stops, your time is up. Okay. All right. Now, we're beginning this exercise in class, but here again, I'm encouraging each one of us, even though we're beginning this in class, on a personal note, to the degree that you are really serious about discovering what your purpose is, this is an exercise that you want to really give serious thought to continue beyond class. Looking back and looking at discovering those achievements in order to discover your giftedness, okay? Now, how many of us, out of your list of 5, can identify any patterns from your childhood, things that you really feel that has happened since your childhood now into your adulthood that you can really identify with in terms of reoccurring patterns of achievement. Anybody? Sister Joseph.
Yes, one of the things that I can identify is that from very young, I always took care of the kids in the neighborhood, and I was the same age as they were. But they would bring the kids that had a cut or injured, and I was barely a child like them. I was the same age, and then it turned into me being a professional nurse, and it carried over into that career that I chose.
You can see, even as a child, you were a caretaker. All right? You were a caretaker. And now as your life continued to progress, you find yourself now as a nurse by profession. Okay, great. Brother Osborne.
Many of mine always involve youth or older people. It's always either really young or really old. So my mom would always used to say, leave those kids alone, stop bothering the kids. It's always been there, or I was sitting at their feet of like older people all the time. And so many of my accomplishments are things that I consider accomplishments for being older people, being to talk to older people, or it was always in the accomplishments of people and connecting with them.
Okay, you found even from a childhood a pattern that began to where the connection with youth, kids, combo with actually spending time in company of older people. And what you find yourself presently doing is, your name is Coach O. Okay, what does a coach do? What's the primary purpose of a coach? To do what? Train and develop. Train and develop. To guide, to instruct. Train and develop. You can probably see his effectiveness in terms of what he does now as a coach. The development of that process of sitting in the feet of older people, learning instruction, and now imparting, being able to impart that into the lives of younger people. And not only just younger people right now, but also parents who are parenting their children. Okay? Anybody else? Brother Joseph. Let's get the mic over here to him. Okay, is that mic on? Okay, hold it up to your mouth, Brother Joseph. Let's get the other mic. That's it. Okay.
I remember when I lived from very young age in school that I can remember from what they call Trinidad Stand 1, that's the African pattern. And we called one day the teacher asked whole class to spell a word. And I was the only one who could spell a word, right? And eventually the education system Trinidad, I always had something to excel. And I was like, overcome first. And I received in my high school career, my high school education too. I started at the bottom, but so happened that because of my pride and desire, I ended up at the top. Right? And then having lived in Trinidad, Panama, working too, I was really happy that I excelled. I did win some awards, excellent work, came to Abilene and same spirit, manifested itself, but when I went to education, I won some awards. I have won quite a few effectiveness awards. I won here. I won True England because I came good. I won 5 years of effectiveness. 5 years in the talk again. That inspiration manifested me because 2010 I won the Silver Business Award. That used connected that I can neither shall not doubt.
Continue exploring your own giftedness, your achievements, and on Sunday, what we're going to do as a group, we're going to have your group, don't share this, your 5 things with anybody. The next step we're going to do in groups, we're going to have the group that you're in just to identify what they see in you as your gifts might be. And what we want you to do is to be able to see how that others sometimes may see things that you may not see. And there are some things that you may have already written down, and if somebody else sees it, what that does is it affirms what it is that God may have gifted you with. Okay? So we want you to continue that exercise, but I want to call our attention to page 40. And Arthur makes this point in regards to our gifts. He says, look for times in your past where you have used your giftedness in different situations. You will find that your whole life is centered around your giftedness because it is the foundation upon which you were created and upon which your purpose is built. It affects your learning style, your career orientation, and your entire educational matriculation through your life. It is that important for you to begin to understand your giftedness because it will affect everything in your entire life. Let me tell you how important that is, especially those who are parents. If I have the clarity of what I just stated early in my parental parenting, I would have been so much more a better parent. Parent, this is the gem of a parenting clarity if you haven't begin to adopt this. Find what it is that your child is gifted at, and that's what you focus on. Not what your dreams of what you think your child should be, but what your child is actually gifted at. You will find, you then will be in sync with God the Father in terms of developing of your child spiritually. I want to end us with this scripture. In Psalms chapter 139, I'm going to end with this, and I'm going to read this from the Message translation. We're going to address this question on Sunday. In what ways does Psalms 139, 12 through 17 help us understand the concept of chosenness and giftedness? But I'm going to read this as we close. Listen to this few passages of scripture in light of the concepts of chosenness and giftedness. Listen to Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16. Oh yes, you shaped me first inside, then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God, you're breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in the adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit. How I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watch me grow. From conception to birth. Notice conception and birth, two separate occasions. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. The days of my life all prepared before I even lived one day. Think on that in regards to chosenness and giftedness, and we'll follow up on that come Sunday. God bless. Let's make our way next door. As